All right, welcome back. We got this Jeep back in the shop. It's time for some more upgrades to it. So this time around, we're going to be doing more suspension upgrades. For that, we've got this. It's a Clayton off-road long arm kit for the front and rear. It's got double adjustable arms at both ends. It's got this cross member replacement, replaces the transmission cross member. That's what the lower links are going to mount to, and then it has a replacement for the upper link, since this is converting the front to a 3-link rather than 4-link with Panhard bar. So should free up some movement out of the front end there. The rear, it's got these brackets that bolt onto the frame. I'll drill and bolt them in, and then nice set of arms for the rear. Not real sold on the square tube on them, but it'll work just fine. To go along with these, we also have a set of these. So these are a 12-inch travel ORI. So we're going to be working on mounting them up too. We've got a set of mounts for I think these were off of a YJ or something from Genrite, but they look like they'll be able to work. So we'll figure out how to get those in there. But anyway, time to get started on this. All right, so the first thing I want to do before I pick this thing up, I want to get some starting measurements. So I'm going to measure from the ground to the frame, like about 20.5. And then from the ground to the center of the axle, call it 19. So I got about 1.5 inches difference there, not a lot. Probably going to wind up being a couple inches higher than it is right now, but I want to get a baseline where I'm starting, and then I'll know where I'm going to end up from there once I start getting everything mounted up. I can figure out where the shock towers and everything are going to go for those ORIs. That way, there shouldn't be any surprises when I set it back down on the ground that way, but we'll see. All right, so with it up in the air, we can start figuring out what's got to come off first. I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to pull out all of the exhaust. I know this cross member's got to go to where I can even get the exhaust out. So I think that's where we're going to start. We'll get the jack up under the transmission or transfer case, wherever it can fit. Get the cross member out, get the exhaust out, and I think while we're in the mood to pull things out, I'm going to go ahead and pull these sway bars, because we're not going to need those anymore. Well, here's my pile of parts we've removed in preparation for getting this long arm kit in here. Had to pull out this exhaust loop too, because it is going to be in the way of this new upper link bracket. So I'm going to have to figure something out to come off the exhaust here and come down and miss that bracket. So I think for now, I can start working on getting the cross member pieces put in and get the new lower links put on, see how that all starts to fit. All right, so I'm starting to get this cross member fit up. It's just in there kind of loose right now, but you can kind of start to see how this is going to work. You've got your mounting points for the new lower links here on these outer pieces. One of those on each side, and then this is their center chunk that comes out separately from the other two. So it makes so you can get the transmission and everything out if you have to. Again, just kind of loosely snugged in there, but you can also see there's other plates that are going to bolt on all the way around this thing to really tie it together, so it should be plenty strong. So I think for now I'm going to see if I can get the new links stuck up in there, and maybe I'll go ahead and pull these out and get them attached to the axle as well, so I can kind of start to see how this thing's going to come together. Alright, actually got it in there. Wasn't too bad. It should come up, and yeah, pretty well lines up with where it's going to mount at the axle, so that's a good sign. All right, get the other side done, and then I'll get these old links out, get these attached to the axle. All right, well, I got the 2 lower links installed. That was an adventure. Wound up disconnecting the upper on the passenger side since we're not using it anymore anyway. Had to do a little filing in the holes up here to get the bolts to go through. They're still they're difficult to get in there on this thing. You kind of see where you got to get to the bolts for those links. There's not a lot of room to work with. And then come around the other side, I'm trying to get up on that nut. Also not the easiest thing in the world, but we got there. So everything's just kind of in here loose right now. So now I think what I'm going to do next is probably go ahead and pull the upper on the other side, cut off the old lower mounts, get those out of the way, and then I can work on getting the new upper link mount put in, which is going to go right about here. So we'll get started on pulling some of that loose. Alright, well, after a bunch of cutting and grinding, I've got this side of the frame pretty well ready to go. So this is where this new bracket's going to go. So got everything cleaned up to be able to put it in place, so I just need to make some marks to figure out exactly how it's got to go in there, and I can get it at least tacked in and start seeing about getting the original upper link off of there, because I got to cut that off of the axle now too, because there's another upper bracket that goes on the axle for the new upper link. So to start with, I'll get this thing marked out where it's got to go and get it tacked in place. All right, so here's that bracket clamped in place. That's where it's got to go. Of course, I'm going to have to move the pad on the lift to be able to weld it up, but the way things are right now, I can at least get it tacked in place. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Alright, so with this new upper bracket installed, time to pull out the stock upper, get this cut off of the truss. I'm super glad I put the time into doing that, but oh well, that's the way these go. While I was under here, I also went ahead and installed all the plates to attach all 3 pieces of this cross member, got the upper joints tightened in, so everything up here's all kind of finalized and ready to go. So yeah, I'll get this bar out of here, probably get this bracket cut off the frame, and then I can get that upper in, see how it's going to fit. Right, so with that upper link removed, I'm going to try and pull this joint out before I start cutting that off. I'm also going to pull the air locker line and vent tube right now so I don't burn those up, because that wouldn't make for a good day. So I'll see if I can get this thing out. I know they were a pain to get in, so I'm sure they're going to be a pain to get out. Alright, now with that all cut off and cleaned up well enough, kind of set that in there, and I can kind of start to see how this new upper link is going to fit. So I can start getting it kind of mocked up in there, figure out how this thing needs to sit, and get it tacked on. All right, so here we go. We got the upper link mounted in there. I've got it coming pretty much straight out of this frame side bracket, and that's kind of letting this fall where it needs to. In order to get this in here, I actually had to roll the axle forward quite a bit. You can see I don't have a whole lot of adjustment in here. So right now, I basically have 0 caster in this axle. So in order to take care of that, I'm going to have to lengthen these lowers to get the bottom of the axle to roll around and get some caster back in it. And unfortunately, I think I've mentioned before, these lowers only have right-hand threads on both ends. So in order to adjust it, I've got to take one end loose, and then I can make an adjustment, mount it back in there, and check, and it's probably going to be a back and forth process to do that. Really wish these had left and right threads, but that's kind of my major complaint about this kit so far. Other than that, this thing is really high quality, really well put together, but left and right threads, that needs to be on the next version of this. So with this upper bracket tacked on now, I think I'm going to go ahead and make a little bit of adjustment in these lowers while I've got it up in the air. I know I got to do something with them, so I might as well get it started and get these adjusted a little bit. I can set this thing down on the ground and see where it's at and adjust a little more to bring it to where I want it to be. All right, so I adjusted both of these lowers, gave about 4 threads or so on each end. Did both of them the same, so hopefully it'll keep the front end straight. So now I'm going to go ahead and set this thing down on the ground, see what my caster looks like, see how much more I'm going to have to adjust. All right, so with the Jeep sitting on the ground, I actually got about a little over 7 degrees of caster, which is a little more than I was shooting for. The front end rocked back a little bit more than I thought it was going to when I set it down. But the good news is now the upper link on this thing does have the appropriate left and right threads, so I can make some quick adjustments with that and get this thing finalized where it's got to be. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, get this thing set where it's going to need to be, and then I'll get it back up in the air, and I can get brackets welded and all that sort of good stuff. Alright, so now with everything adjusted pretty close, I'm going to go ahead and pop this upper link off again and get in there and get this welded up, get the bracket at the frame welded up. I think I'm going to try to get something in here that's going to tie this upper link mount onto that truss the way the original one that was there did. So yeah, I'll pop this thing out and start welding things up. Yeah, well, I got everything welded up. I wound up not filling in this little spot in here because I was able to get up and weld that directly to that truss bracket at the top of that link mount. So I think that should do fine. So the other thing, these 2 bolt holes are no longer going to be useful because of the way that link bracket sits behind there. So I'm going to drill a couple of new holes up a little higher on there so I can get those bolts still in. So that'll make it so this cover is still supporting that upper link. Should keep it nice and strong. All right, we'll get a little black paint on here and it'll be good as new, possibly even better. The runs tell you got enough on there. Alright, now that the paint's dried, I've got the upper link reinstalled. I also went ahead and rehooked up the vent line and the air locker line. So those are all ready to go. That pretty well wraps up the front link setup. I still got to tighten up these lower joints, but I'm going to wait to do that until this thing's sitting on the ground because those are vulcanized rubber joints, so they kind of want to be tightened up in their normal ride height position, so I'll do that when it gets on the ground. So I still got to get the exhaust figured out, and I'm going to have to do a little work on the drive shaft as well. But as far as all the links and everything, it's all hooked up and ready to go. So I think I'm going to move to the rear, start getting some of that set up. Of course, again, the lift pads are in exactly the wrong position for those, so I'll have to deal with that, but not too big a deal. So start figuring out what I need to do back here. All right, well, the first thing I think I'm going to do back here is drop this link out of the bracket, and I'm going to get this cut off, get that out of the way before I have the new bracket in place here, because that's probably going to be in the way of trying to cut this off. So we'll make this go away first, and then I'll work on getting the new bracket put in back up here. So with that link out of there and cut this off, this inside piece is going to be fun because it's right next to the gas tank, so that'll keep things interesting. But I should be able to at least cut along here, get all this off. I'll probably cut along that seam right there, get at least this portion on the outside off, and then I'll figure out what I'm doing with the rest of it. Alright, so now, see what I can do to get this inside piece as much cut off as I can. I got the rest of that bracket cut off. Didn't bother filming any of that because I didn't figure we needed video evidence of the explosion that finally took me out. But it all worked out fine. So on to the next step. So I need to get this lift pad moved back into here. I think the easiest way for me to do that is I'm going to use one of my little underlift stands. I should be able to pick up here enough to get this thing loose to where I can swing it out of my way, and then I can get that bracket put in place here and start seeing about drilling some holes. Alright, that should work. The next issue I have is this bracket on the gas tank skid plate. Since the new link bracket is going to go kind of over the frame right here, and the lower bracket is right where this thing's at. So I'm going to have to go ahead and chop that off, and then I'll probably have to figure out some way to replace that once I get the new bracket in place. Right, so I got this mount for that skid plate cut off. I also wound up having to cut off a little of this body mount here to make everything fit. So with that, bracket will go in something like that. So now I need to get that kind of held on there and drill a bunch of holes. This thing should bolt up. Well, since this frame doesn't give me a lot of places to try to clamp this to, what I'll try to do here is hold that in there, and then we'll use the stand, and I should be able to use that to hold everything in place. Let's see, that needs to go back a little bit. Up there, just trying to line up the front and back edges of that hole with the hole in the frame. Everything looks like it's where it should be, so we'll kind of clamp it that way. And now I can see about getting some holes drilled, or at least marked. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to drill all those with that in place, but we'll see what I can do. Alright, so for drilling these holes, we're going to wind up doing, so I took a regular 1/2 inch bit, ran it in there, got myself a good start to those holes. And then what I'm going to do is I've got one of these little Christmas tree bits, I'll run that through, and I'll show you why here in just a second. Actually, let's go this one. There we go. That's a 1/2 inch hole in probably half the time or less that it would take to run that through there. So you're only drilling off that small little bit to start with, and then each successive one. So you're only taking a little bit of material at a time, and it just goes so much quicker. Hit this one. All right, so I got these 3 holes drilled, so I'm going to go ahead and put the nut plate for those in there. So like that's going to get kind of fished in that way, and I should be able to get at least one of those to line up, and I can get bolts in those, and then that'll hold everything in place while I drill the rest of the hole, so I don't wind up having something kick off on me and not line up like it's supposed to. So I'll get some bolts in those and get the rest of my holes drilled. Drilling the holes up through the bottom of the frame, this is the setup I'm using. I got my drill set up on the stand here, so I can use the screw on this to actually push the drill up through the frame, so I don't have to wind up pushing up on it and getting chips in places I really don't want hot chips and all that. So go ahead and finish off this hole. Perfect. Takes basically no muscle power at all. I'll just get the other one done, and then that'll be all the holes on this side. Get that bolted up, and then swap over and I'll get the other side done. Well, here it is all bolted up. So a couple of things I've discovered here in the process of getting this bolted on is these 2 nut plates here can't be there when the one for the bolts from the bottom go in. So I wound up having to take all of this back apart, put that plate in, and then put it all back together. So I only wasted a little bit of time, but again, we're working without instructions here, so I'm doing the best I can. The other thing too is it appears there's a button head bolt, and from the pictures I've seen, it looks like that's where it goes. So there it is. That's all bolted up. So I'm going to go ahead and get the links put in here, so that this will hold the rear end in place while I do the other side. Show you something on the other side that I've noticed. So over here, there is no hole right there. So I'm going to have to probably hole saw that into the frame so I can get all the nut plates and everything in there. It also kind of takes away the thing that I was referencing off of to locate front to back on the other side, but I'll figure something out for that. So right now I'll get those other lower links on, get that all in place, and then I can come over here and start working on all this. And I got the driver's side done. The only real difference between this and the passenger side is this hole that I had to drill in the frame there to get all those nut plates in. We got that in. All the links are hooked up. I also went ahead and swapped out the panhard bar for this heavy-duty adjustable version. The stock one looked like it was just waiting to break, so with everything else we got going on this thing, beefing that up is probably going to be a good idea too. So that pretty well wraps up the long arm kit on this thing. Overall, pretty good kit. 8 of 10, would use again. It's got a few little issues that I had to deal with along the way, but not anything too difficult to deal with for something along this scale. But be nice if it had some better instructions. Be nice if the links actually had the left and right threads, like I said, to make them a little more easily adjustable. Other than that, I think it's pretty decent. I think it's going to work out pretty well. So our next step on this is going to be taking out all the original springs and shocks, and I'm going to have to get up into here, cut all this out, and start working on getting the new towers and ORIs and everything set up in this. So that will be what's happening in our next episode.